Parental Burnout. Why you're running on empty, and what actually refills the tank. A parenting guide from Creative Minds Montessori. Parental burnout is a real, named syndrome, not a character flaw and not ordinary tiredness. It has 4 specific dimensions: exhaustion in the parenting role, emotional distancing from your children, a feeling of being a bad parent, and a painful contrast with the parent you used to be. It's common. Roughly 1 in 8 parents, and in the 2024 Surgeon General's advisory, 48% of parents said their stress is completely overwhelming most days, versus 26% of other adults. The mechanism is simple and impersonal: demands have outrun your resources for too long. What helps isn't trying harder. It's tiny restorative acts anchored to your routine, rebuilding even a small village, and dropping the perfect parent script. A mother of a 3-year-old and a 7-month-old described being touched constantly, the toddler wanting to be held all day, the baby nursing while pulling at her skin. She hits her limit before lunch every day. And she kept prefacing it with "I love my kids," that cushion parents put under a hard sentence before saying it. A father found himself yelling at his son for spilling water. A cup of water. His tank was so empty that a small accident registered as a catastrophe. Another mother's first instinct when overwhelmed was to cut the things keeping her upright: exercise, rest, downtime, and she got chronic pain and insomnia in exchange. 2 things run through all of it: the exhaustion isn't the kind sleep fixes, and every parent felt they had to apologize before describing it. This has a clinical definition, and knowing it helps, because most parents assume they're just weak. Parental burnout was characterized in research in 2019 and has 4 dimensions: overwhelming exhaustion specifically in the parental role, emotional distancing from your children, a sense of ineffectiveness, "I'm not a good parent," and a painful contrast with the parent you used to be. That last one is the tell. Burnout doesn't feel like tiredness. It feels like becoming someone else. And it's genuinely distinct from depression. Burnout's severe outcomes stay robust even after controlling for depression and job burnout. It isn't depression wearing a parenting costume, and it isn't work stress following you home. The mechanism is impersonal, which is the most useful thing about it: chronic imbalance between demands and resources. When the daily demands persistently outstrip the rest, support, money and coping capacity available to meet them, burnout accumulates. It's an equation tipping the wrong way over months, not a verdict on your character. And the documented risk factors are mostly circumstances rather than failings: a child's chronic illness or difficult temperament, lack of social and family support, high social expectations toward parents, co-parenting conflict, difficulty with emotional regulation, and child-oriented perfectionism, the drive to be the perfect parent. Which is a risk factor, not a protection. But the emotional core isn't exhaustion at all. When researchers actually listened to burned-out mothers, the thread running through everything was fear. Fear of not being good enough, fear the child feels unloved, fear about who the child will become, fear of losing control. Alongside it sat guilt and shame, measuring against impossible standards and feeling ashamed even to say so out loud, plus a loss of identity they described as a break in the continuity of self. And one mother described functioning robotically for months, going through the motions, emotionally distanced from her own children, like a stranger in her own life. And underneath all of it, usually, is the mental load, the cognitive labor of planning, tracking, remembering and anticipating. It's invisible, unpaid, and never clocks out. Neurologically, carrying it keeps executive function firing more or less constantly, and without recovery breaks that produces impaired decision-making and reduced emotional regulation. Which is precisely why a burned-out parent snaps over a spilled cup of water. It isn't a temper problem. It's an unrest prefrontal cortex. Here's the historical fact that reframes everything. Parents were never meant to do this alone, and for most of human history they didn't. For tens of thousands of years humans raised children communally, groups of 20 or more, multiple generations, neighbors and older children all pitching in. Anthropologists call it alloparenting, from the Greek allo, meaning other. It takes a village isn't an aspirational slogan, it's a description of the historical default. Which means we're running an experiment. As psychiatrist Bruce Perry has pointed out, at no other time in human history have we asked one or two adults to meet all of a child's physical, emotional, social, and spiritual needs. And here's the strongest evidence that this is structural rather than personal. Parental burnout rates are highest in individualistic Western cultures and lower in collectivist ones. If burnout were about individual weakness, it wouldn't cluster by culture. The job description changed, too. Parenting once centered on keeping children safe, fed and healthy. Modern intensive parenting layered on enrichment, emotional attunement, developmental optimization, and curated experiences, none of which can be completed, all of which raise the demand side of the equation permanently. Then the phones, which amplify it in three measurable ways. Comparison. Parenting groups drive social comparison linked to burnout through the emotions those comparisons stir, the sense that everyone else is managing. The screen time guilt loop. Parents cycle between allowing and restricting screens and feel guilt either way, and research finds the stress comes less from the screen time itself than from the guilt about it. And the parent's own phone. On days when parents feel they've been less responsive to their infant, their smartphone use is associated with more depressive symptoms. But note the crucial moderator: on days they feel they have been responsive, phone use shows no such link. It isn't the device. It's the guilt. Where tech genuinely helps, it connects an isolated parent to support and telehealth therapy, and shared calendars can make the invisible load visible, which is the necessary first step before it can be split. 3 common fixes, honestly. The first, push through and cut your own maintenance first. It keeps the household running, it feels responsible, and in an acute newborn stretch it's sometimes genuinely necessary. But it's the single biggest accelerant. Exercise, rest and downtime are the resources side of the demand-resource equation, so deleting them doesn't reduce the load, it removes your capacity to carry it. The mother who cut exercise and rest first got chronic pain and insomnia, then had to leave her job entirely. Sacrificing yourself first isn't efficiency. It's spending the principle. The second, a drink to take the edge off. Culturally normalized, social, and it genuinely feels like a reward after a brutal day. But it disguises a potential problem as self-care. 2 or more glasses to buffer the hard hours makes the next day twice as hard, and alcohol is a depressant, so it worsens anxiety and low mood rather than relieving them, while being dependence-forming and progressive. The joke gets funnier as the pattern gets worse, which is what makes it hard to see. The third, individual self-care as the whole fix. Micro-recovery is genuinely protective. But framed as the solution, it hands the problem back to the exhausted individual. A bath does not fix an unfair division of labor, no paid leave, unaffordable childcare, or a partner who isn't sharing the load. And the one that hurts most to name: try harder, do more, be the perfect parent. It comes from love and high standards. But child-oriented perfectionism is a documented risk factor for burnout, and trying harder is by definition adding to the demand side. The research-backed move is to abandon the cult of the perfect parent, not to optimize it. Tendencies, not rules. On average, mothers carry roughly 71% of the household mental load versus about 29% for fathers, and for daily repetitive tasks the gap is wider. One parent becomes the default, the one who absorbs invisible labor by reflex, and resentment isn't a character flaw in that person, it's a signal pointing at the imbalance. Then the perception gap that turns it into a fight. Fathers consistently overestimate their own contribution, often describing the split as equal when the other partner experiences it as lopsided. Both partners then feel unseen, which is why this argument goes nowhere on vibes and only moves on specifics. But both parents burn out. In one survey, 55% of mothers versus 44% of fathers reported feeling burned out. A real gap, and not the chasm the culture implies. Fathers' burnout has a distinct shape. Dads more often have smaller, less supportive networks and perceive more isolation, so their distress stays hidden and rarely gets screened. Paternal postpartum depression is real. Father's depressive symptoms tend to rise across a child's first 5 years, and paternal perinatal anxiety runs somewhere around 2 to 18%. Father's burnout is usually the quiet one, less voiced, less asked about, and therefore less treated. Single parents carry sole caregiving, financial strain, and no one to hand off to, and often manage more invisible labor than partnered parents with no relief valve at all. If that's you, the share the care method is the whole intervention, and it has to come from outside the household. LGBTQ+ parents carry every driver above plus minority stress, which depletes the same resource pool parenting draws on. Though there's a flip side worth copying, same-sex couples more often report a deliberately negotiated division of labor rather than one that defaulted along gender lines, and that explicit negotiation is protective. To fix a split, name the load with specific examples, not accusations, make it visible on a shared list, challenge auto-defaulting, and hand off whole domains. Not help me with bedtime, but you own bedtime, including remembering it. All three methods converge on one idea, which is also the Montessori idea of the prepared adult. Regulate the adult and you regulate the room. You are the environment your child grows in, and environments need maintenance. The first method, redefine self-care as tiny acts anchored to your existing routine. 2 mechanisms. Behaviorally, small tweaks accumulate while big plans requiring resources you don't have simply never happen, which is why schedule a spa day fails and one slow breath doesn't. And developmentally, a regulated parent regulates the child. When a supportive adult is calm and present, a child can tolerate considerably more difficulty, and a parent's calm gets translated to the children. Your regulation isn't self-indulgence. It's one of your child's primary resources. So anchor a 30-second restorative act to something you already do daily. A long exhale while the coffee brews. 3 things you're grateful for while doing the dishes. 10 seconds of looking at the sky at pickup. Add 2 tools with names short enough to remember while depleted. Halt, am I hungry, angry, lonely, tired? That catches the state before it becomes an outburst. And stop, take a breath and make the exhale long, observe, proceed, for the moment you feel the surge. None of this disturbs your child at all, and for toddlers you can narrate it out loud, Mama's taking 3 big breaths and then we'll go, which quietly teaches the very regulation skill you're using. Expect it to feel too small to matter for the first week, the effect is cumulative. The saboteur is dismissing it because it's small and waiting for a real break instead. The real break may not come this year. The 30 seconds is available today. The second method is the one the evidence most directly supports: rebuild the village and share the care. Isolation is the anomaly that created the problem. Humans are wired to parent communally, so the highest leverage intervention isn't improving your technique. It's adding people. Burnout is a resource shortage, and other adults are the resource. The steps are smaller than they sound. Name the struggle to one trusted person, out loud, without the "I love my kids" but preamble, because that alone breaks the shame loop that keeps burnout private and therefore permanent. Trade concrete help with one other family, swap a pickup, swap a Saturday morning, and keep it reciprocal so nobody feels indebted. Join or start a small parent group, even one of 3 people. And this matters. Treat quality childcare or preschool as a legitimate piece of your village rather than an admission of failure. Shared care is the research-backed fix on the resource side. The guilt attached to it is cultural, not evidential. For your child, expand their circle of trusted adults gradually, with short, predictable, repeated handoffs involving the same people and a warm, consistent goodbye ritual, so they build genuine, secure attachment to those alloparents instead of experiencing an abrupt separation. This is protective at every age and most urgently in the newborn crunch. Expect it to feel embarrassing to ask the first time and dramatically easier the second. The saboteur is waiting until you're less overwhelmed to reach out. The overwhelm is the reason, and it won't clear on its own. The third method is uncomfortable but well supported: drop the cult of the perfect parent and use actual self-compassion. Perfectionism and information overload are drivers of burnout, not defenses against it. And self-compassion isn't a nice sentiment, it activates the body's caregiving and soothing system, restoring a physiological sense of safety, which is precisely the resource burnout has drained. Being kind to yourself makes you more available to your child, not less. So pick a mantra plain enough to use while angry: this is hard, I'm doing my best, I'm a good parent. And prune your parenting inputs. Mute a few accounts, unfollow a few experts, and accept that you cannot integrate the advice of 30 specialists who disagree with each other. Then consciously accept good enough on the low-stakes things, and choose which things those are while you're calm rather than at 6 p.m. And hold on to the reframe that does the most work of anything here: you're not doing it wrong, it's just that hard. Structural facts: no paid leave, unaffordable childcare, no village, make this genuinely difficult, and your exhaustion is evidence of the circumstances, not of your inadequacy. This one is entirely internal. Your child only experiences the downstream effect of a calmer, less reactive parent. For preschoolers there's a bonus. Modeling "I made a mistake and that's okay" teaches them the self-talk you're learning. The saboteur is turning this into another performance. Auditing whether you're being self-compassionate correctly is just perfectionism with new vocabulary. A good program does something for a burned-out parent that no technique can: it changes the arithmetic. It is shared care, the resource side fix the research points to. The mechanisms are concrete. Consistency between home and school makes family life more predictable and calmer, and a child who knows what happens next fights less about it, which means measurably less parental depletion. It's a virtuous cycle. Their security makes it easier for you to stay regulated, and your regulation makes them more secure. And trained observation gives you a second, calmer set of eyes. Teachers watching all day can flag a pattern you're too depleted to notice, and just as valuably, can tell you this is normal. For a parent whose burnout is fed by fear, "this is normal, we see it all the time" is a genuine intervention. A weak program makes it worse in specific ways. High staff turnover is the big one, and it's worth asking about directly. Frequent caregiver changes disrupt continuity, can trigger real sadness and behavior changes in a child attached to a departed teacher, and mean new staff who don't know your child, which adds worry to a parent who has none to spare. Thin communication, or a center that brushes off a worried parent, deepens exactly the isolation self-doubt runs on. So run it 3 ways. You give them your child's triggers, what's happening at home, and what you're trying so they can mirror it. And you're allowed to say that you are stretched thin. It's useful context for the adults spending 6 hours a day with your child. They give you real observation, progress and patterns and reassurance, not just incidents. And the child gets consistent goodbye rituals and a plan they can hold: first school, then Papa picks you up. This is not medical advice. Talk to your pediatrician, your doctor, or a licensed mental health professional. The most important red flags are escape and self-harm ideation. Parental burnout increases both escape ideation, the fantasy of simply walking away from parenting, and suicidal ideation, and strikingly, these are more frequent in parental burnout than in job burnout or depression. Any thought of harming yourself, or that your family would be better off without you, means reaching out today rather than later. In the U.S., call or text 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, available around the clock. And stated without judgment, burnout has a documented circular relationship with neglect and harsh parenting. So emotional distancing, harsh discipline, or yelling you can't control aren't evidence that you're a bad parent. They're evidence the situation has outrun what one depleted person can manage, and it needs outside support now. In the postpartum window, use the pediatrician. 15 to 20% of new mothers experience perinatal depression, and about half go undiagnosed and untreated. The Academy of Pediatrics recommends screening once during pregnancy and at the 1, 2, 4, and 6-month infant well-child visits. For a good structural reason, pediatricians see the mother-baby pair around 8 times in the first year, far more often than the mother sees her own doctor. Your child's pediatrician is a completely legitimate place to raise your own mental health. Fathers experience postpartum depression too and should be identified as well. And why it matters beyond you. Untreated parental depression is linked to impaired bonding and to toxic stress that can affect infant brain development, so treating the parent is treating the child. The Academy's framing is worth repeating exactly. This happens to many new parents, you are not at fault, and it is treatable. Other resources: the National Maternal Mental Health Hotline, 1-833-943-5746, and Postpartum Support International, 1-800-944-4773. There's no formula here, and notice which direction the research points, away from optimization. The antidote to burnout is dropping the cult of the perfect parent, not mastering it. That's an unusual finding. Most advice tells you to do something better, this one tells you to do less, and means it. The cultural data makes the same point from another angle. Burnout is higher in individualistic societies and lower in collectivist ones, so the right way to parent is context-bound rather than universal. Your family's background, values, and available support shape what will actually work. The one thing that is firmly evidence-based is also the most forgiving. Your own regulation feeds your child's. A cared-for parent is the environment a child grows in, which means taking care of yourself isn't stolen from your child's account, it's a deposit into it. So trust yourself. You know this particular child better than any expert on any screen. You're not doing it wrong. It's just that hard. And it does not stay this hard. For the full guide and more parenting resources, visit creativemindsmontessori.com/parenting.